Hello, and thanks for joining us for a conversation on resilient parenting and coping in times of uncertainty. My name is Joe Primo, and I'm the CEO of Good Grief. This conversation is going to offer you tools on teaching your child to develop a self care plan and strategies to cope with the ever changing situation that we find ourselves in during COVID 19. The information we're sharing is from our Good Grief Schools program. For those of you who are new to us, the Good Grief Schools program teaches resilience to students grades K through 12 through a social and emotional learning curriculum, provides peer support groups to grieving students, and offers parent and professional education. You can learn more at goodgriefschools.org. In this webinar, we're going to define self-care, identify strategies for proactive self-care practices, and learn how to teach children to cope with difficulties around uncertainty and change. And I think we can all agree that COVID-19 has created one of the most fluid set of circumstances that most of us have experienced in our lifetimes. I think this has been highlighted most significantly in the recent plans to return to school during the fall. It seems that nearly every day there is a new plan, new guidelines, and implications for what life is going to look like for you and for your family come fall. On top of that, there's an ever present reality that this virus may never seem to go away, or at least no time soon. And because of that, the economy is continuing to struggle, jobs are continuing to be lost, and people are still at risk of getting sick or dying. So, in sum, there is a lot of change and there is a lot of uncertainty in our lives. So, how do we cope in times of uncertainty? How do we practice healthy self care? This is going to be the prime topic of our discussion today. It's our hope that you're going to be able to use these resources to care for yourself and your children during these difficult times. So, what is self care? Self care is the intentional process of planning and implementing practices that are meant to care for one's own emotional, physical, intellectual, and spiritual health and well being. Self care is self focused, and that might sound like a bad thing, but in actuality, self care is incredibly important as a kind of protective barrier that prepares us to face stress, to face uncertainty, and change within the now and in the future. So, the classic image for self care is that of a cup. Inside the cup is a constantly changing level of energy and capacity to manage our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Stress and stressful situations deplete these levels, effectively pouring out what is inside of our cup. And so we need to restore our capacity to manage stress now and in the future. So, the primary way we do that is through self care practices, and that can include simple things like sleep, eating healthy foods, and exercise. Coping is different, it's a reaction rather than a prevention. So, coping is how one responds in the moment to negative or stressful situations and experiences. We need coping when situations arise that are unanticipated, right? So maybe that sounds familiar because we are all living with a lot of unanticipated, fluid circumstances at this time. So we should teach our kids to plan for healthy ways to care for themselves, but also adapt and respond to the complexities that life is going to throw their way. One of the best ways we teach our children to engage in self-care and coping practices is by modeling. So children watch the behaviors of parents and caregivers constantly, and they pick up on the healthy and unfortunately the unhealthy coping mechanisms that we as adults use. And this might sound counterintuitive, but teaching your child starts with your own practice and your own commitment to self-care and healthy coping. Some questions you can ask yourself about self care include: do I prioritize and take time for myself? How often do I do this? What gets in the way of that happening? It's often assumed that self care needs to be a big, lavish outing with our friends, right? Something over the top. But the reality is that self care does not have to include a lot of time or money, but rather effort to try and understand the things that will help to refill your empty cup. Simplicity and consistency are often most effective. So, on to coping here. Some questions we can ask ourselves about coping include: how do I tend to cope with unanticipated stressors? What are some of your common unhealthy habits, such as drinking a little too much alcohol, stress eating, binge watching Netflix into the wee hours of the night, emotionally detaching from those that you love, or perhaps there's something else you do? Do you acknowledge with your child when you didn't respond well to a stressful situation? And how might you want to do that differently in the future? It's important to identify common pitfalls for ourselves and really try to understand the need that those coping mechanisms are trying to fill. Then, with compassion and patience, try to work on your own coping to improve over time, right? Work with those things, improve them over time so that you can model healthy coping to your children. We have a few tips here and strategies for teaching your child to engage in regular self care practices and to cope with stressors in healthy and helpful ways. So, for self care, one of the best things you can do is work with your child to build a plan and then help them stick to it. Whether you have a young child or a teenager, a great activity to lead them through is developing a self care plan. So, start by describing this mental health cup referenced earlier that has to be refilled every day. Explain that stress and everyday challenges will empty the cup and that we need to do things every day to refill it. So, after doing that, you can then brainstorm with your child or teenager to see what kind of ideas they have for refilling their cup. And here are the core essentials that need to be part of any self care plan. So, first, mindfulness. We're going to have this in a lesson um, that will be provided to you. Physical exercise, getting plenty of sleep, healthy diet, social interactions, school and education, taking time for fun activities. Activities, to be clear, that your child likes, not just what you like to do. And so, when it comes to teaching healthy coping strategies, remember that coping is how one responds in the moment to stress or a stressful situation. And I have three easy ideas for you to start using with your kids at home. First, deep breathing. The first is one that we have already covered in a previous webinar. And deep breathing is one of the most effective ways to cope with strong emotions in stressful situations because it helps to slow down the heart rate, which in turn is going to help calm down all the big feelings identified with the stressor. So I encourage you to go watch that webinar on mindfulness and deep breathing to get a little more information on it. And the deep breathing activities are going to be particularly helpful as healthy coping responses. And then, secondly, grounding techniques. So, grounding is a technique that is proven to help with calming stress or anxiety. The idea behind grounding is that when our fight or flight response starts to kick in, it can start to override the parts of our brain that are responsible for reasoning and for regulation. So, this makes it really hard to keep perspective and to calm down. Grounding is a proven way to do a system override and to dampen that fight or flight response so that we can reason and regulate more easily. Grounding is accomplished by intentionally activating one or multiple of our five senses. So this shifts our energy from fight or flight response to other regions of the brain, and thus that helps us calm the stress. I think this is a really great tool to use whenever kids are feeling stressed or overwhelmed at home, school, or other places. You can do it quietly by yourself, and you can do it without anyone even noticing. So how great is that for you and for your kids? One of our favorite Grounding activities here is just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And this is how you do it. So find a comfortable place to sit. And if possible, close your eyes or focus your gaze on a single object. Begin taking deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. Fully relax all your muscles while continuing to breathe slowly. Keep breathing for approximately 30 seconds or longer if necessary. Open your eyes, and while you continue to breathe, engage your senses by identifying the following things one at a time. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. Take a few last deep breaths and then return to your day. And I just recommend try it out. It's pretty amazing and it works well. So, the third coping strategy, healthy distractions. Our third strategy here is one that should be used as a buffer. So, to help reduce some stress, to then revisit it later and talk about ways to cope and calm. So sometimes children need help gaining distance from the stressful situation before they can calm down. So distractions can help do that. And here are just a few simple things you can do to provide a simple distraction. My personal favorite here, play with your dog or other furry friend. Do a painting or drawing activity with a child and ask them to draw their favorite place, person, or activity. Take them on a walk, bike ride, or run and ask them to identify as many kinds of animals, insects, or birds that they see along the way. So maybe you're seeing here that there's some fun things that you can do. Read a book together, watch a favorite TV show or movie, play with their favorite toys, and really engage in any way that they find fun or the types of activities they enjoy doing. And after they come down with the help of that little distraction, take some time to debrief the situation that caused the stress and help them think about ways they can plan for and cope with that situation in the future. So remember, we started out today with the goal of exploring how to engage in self care and healthy coping in times of uncertainty. It's so easy to lose patience in this process. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of patience to help your child build these skills. But be kind to yourself, be kind to your child, and most importantly, keep refilling your own cup so that you can be fully available and supportive to your child when they need you during stressful situations and the constant change that we're all dealing with right now. So, through this process, both you and your child will build more resilience, build a more resilient muscle to be able to handle all the change and uncertainty that might come your way. We've got a whole bunch more resources about this subject on our website, www.good-grief.org. Be sure to check out the resource page and this webinar's accompanying activities to complete with your child, including other webinars that preceded this one. Please take care and be well.